Hi, this is Samuel and welcome back to my channel, and this video is going to be the first in a series of videos that I'm going to do that are going to be based around the major Arcana cards in Tarot. So just to quickly mention what major and minor Arcana cards actually mean and represent. Arcana is literally in Latin secrets. So major arcana means big secrets and minor arcana means little secrets. So to put that into sort of a perspective that might make a bit more sense with tarot, minor arcana means things that are day-to-day life, things like relationships and work, family, these small details that are day-to-day life basically. Whereas the major arcana cards are more about the person's position in their journey of enlightenment, their journey within life, the progression, the great work, if you want to call it that, the bigger picture basically. So just thought that was kind of relevant to mention what arcana means and the major and minor arcana cards. So I use the Thoth Tarot, which I just find it the best to use. I get the best readings, the clearest readings, and I just connect with the cards a lot better than any other deck. But this will apply to whatever deck you're using. So the first card, and I'll bring this up to the screen so it's a lot clearer and you can actually see it. The first card is the Fool, and you'll notice that number-wise, this card actually isn't a number, it's 0. It's an absence of number. And that's because the Fool really is representing that person that is about to take the first step, about to start the journey, but they haven't actually started it yet, they haven't done anything practical. But the kind of person that feels unfulfilled with life, that feels that there is something more, but hasn't actually started the work on gaining that knowledge, on starting to do the work where they start to fulfill themselves basically and experience something a bit deeper. So I always think of it as a majority of people, unfortunately, they pretty much sleepwalk through life, even though they aren't happy a lot of the time, they don't feel fulfilled. And a lot of people combat this or approach this by filling their life with what I regard as the more trivial aspects. So they will get the promotion at work that then gets them the expensive new car that is better than their neighbour's car or their brother's car, whoever they want to impress. And those kind of things do bring sort of a short burst of excitement and energy and I guess fulfillment for some people. But it never lasts. It's always on to the next thing, the next thing, the next bit of new tech, the next expensive thing, jewellery, other possessions. And it's a constant quest to just sort of keep that rush going. But they never really step out of their box and take that risk, step off the cliff, so to speak. And the person that is the Fool knows that the pursuit of these trivial things is not ever going to bring the happiness. They know that there's something more, something much more deeper and meaningful, and they are starting on that path, but they haven't quite started it yet. So I hope that makes sense. That's how I read the Fool. That's what it means to me, the person that is just about to start. Now, interestingly, I thought I'd just mention the card is 0, And it's in most decks, it's 0. And we have 22 major Arcana cards, so it goes from 0 to 21. But actually in some decks it goes from 1 to 22, and the 22nd card is the Fool. And this is because even when you go through all of the cards and you reach that highest point of enlightenment, if you want to call it that, you then pretty much go back to the start again, because now you've gained all of this knowledge and experience, but now you have to start using it within life. So whatever aspect that you focused on, you then start to bring it into your life and you start the journey again. And it's a never-ending cycle. We will never completely, be enlightened and connected with everything. We're always learning, we're always progressing, and that's kind of the point really with life. And some people may find that kind of disheartening, but each time we go through it, we gain something. We gain deeper knowledge of ourselves, of our place in the universe, our part in life, and that's invaluable in my opinion. In terms of readings, when the Fool comes up in readings that I do, I think of it always as a card that shows new beginnings, innocence, wanting to gain knowledge, faith, someone that doesn't quite know what to expect but doesn't feel satisfied with life and is wanting to make that change, but maybe needs a little help or guidance in how to take that next step or what direction to move in. And in this video we're going to be looking at the second major Arcana card, which is the number 1 card, the Magician, or as it's named in the Thoth Tarot deck, which I primarily use, the Magus. And if we think back to the first card, the Fool, and if we sort of simplify that down to it signifying somebody that doesn't know and is thinking of starting a journey but they haven't yet, then the Magician is somebody that does know, that has started the journey, has started to see the results, and is putting some of this new knowledge into practice within their life. So if I just bring up the traditional Rider-Waite card, and one of the most interesting elements of this card for me is the signifier, if you want to call it that the Magician has mastery over the 4 elements. And we can see that on the card. We have the wand, the sword, the cup and the pentacle. And the wand represents fire, the sword represents air, the cup is water, and the pentacle is earth. And a really quick explanation of what those 4 elements are representing as well. So fire would be, I always think of it as sort of that burning passion within us, the life force, the creativity, the desire within us. The sword that's representing air, for me, is really about intelligence and intellect, and using intuition. If we look at the cup, which is water, and that is really about emotions, emotional aspects of our personality, of our life. It's an internal card for me. So if we think of air as the mind, the cup or water is representing the heart, if that makes sense. And then the pentacle, which is earth, for me, is always the physical things, the things that we can touch and feel, whether that be money. We could put health into that category as well. It's everything that you would think of as the physical. And by this being on the card, it to me is really representing that the magician has started to work with these elements and has started to in some way control them. So if I think of my journey, that would be when I started to learn and put into practice the lesser invoking or the lesser banishing rituals, and started to actually see that this stuff actually works, really. And if we just look at the Magus card, which is the Thoth version of the magician, the Thoth interpretation of it, we can see that these elements are always also signified on this card as well. Another aspect of the magician is that it's somebody that is starting to manifest their world and their shape into reality. So to put that into some context, as I said in the previous video about the Fool, a lot of people very, very casually go through life. They never want to experience certain things, or they never believe that they even can, or that it's possible. And I hear it a lot in my day-to-day practice as well, of people that question, do I actually believe this is real? It isn't possible. Magic is not possible. Tarot is nothing but cards with drawings on them. And once you actually experience things, once you actually experience magic working, once you do start to control the elements, even if it's through a relative sort of beginner ritual like the lesser banishing, but once you do experience that, from my experience, there's really sort of no going back. You have experience shaping reality around you, how you interpret reality, your surroundings, your environment. That's a really sort of life-changing thing. Let's just go back to the Rider-Waite card again, because that's the one that most people will use. And when this card comes up in a reading, now the general sort of three readings that people do are what you would call relationship readings, career or money readings, or just something sort of more loose, but just based around their life. So when this card comes up in readings for relationships, I always think of it signifying something that is based around harmony, effortless, confidence, strength, accepting yourself and being appealing to others, but also being able to, and this sounds bad, but manipulate others. Use your charms, your social skills to achieve your goal. And very similar when I do this reading, when I do a reading and this card comes up within a career sort of question, it means overcoming tests and challenges, economic success, and taking the right successful action and developments. But also, it always has an element to me of charm and magnetism within the working environment, and you essentially affecting people's will around you, being able to be successful in a meeting and get the deal closed, or a job interview, whatever it may be. That's really a big part of this card. And as sort of an overall understanding of this card, it basically means that you are about to become or have become someone that actually knows what you want, who you are, and the goal that you want to achieve, and how you are going to take those decisive steps to get to that goal. Now, just one last, what I find interesting thing about this card, and it's actually something in regards to the Fool card as well, and I'll be applying this to all of the relevant cards as I go through them as well. So if I just bring this up on the screen so you can see, and this is the Tree of Life. So if we just quickly go back to the Fool, and the first sphere on the Tree of Life is Kether. So the Fool is signifying on the Tree of Life the start of the journey, which is from Kether to Chokmah. And today's card, the Magician or the Magus, is Kether to Binah. So there are 22 different variations of this journey on the Tree of Life, and we have 22 major Arcana cards as well. So it's a very interesting link that I'll go into in a lot more detail. Hi, and welcome back. And in this video we're going to be looking at the third card of the major Arcana, which is card number 2, the High Priestess, or in the Thoth Tarot deck just known as the Priestess. And this card for me is really about the intuition and the inner knowledge that we either want to possess or have. And if we just look at the card, we'll look at the Rider-Waite card first. So just to put this into context of, if I was doing a reading and this card came up, and if we just look at maybe two of the most popular readings, which is relationship or career for me personally. So if this card came up in a career reading, it would immediately indicate to me that either this person is working in an industry or job that is based around healing or supporting people, helping people, or that is where they should be starting to put their attention. That is really sort of what their will is, and that's where they should start taking steps. In a relationship reading, it's a very positive card. So if it's somebody that is already in a relationship, then this card really symbolizes the affection, connection, understanding, that sort of really deep care that you have for another person, and that invisible bond that two people can quite rarely have. If it's someone that is single and this comes up in a relationship reading, then I always interpret it as that lonely time, that lonely period, single period, is actually leading to intimacy, true intimacy. So the connection of two souls, the energy exchange, that bond. So it's a really, really positive card. Now, just to quickly mention as well, and just bring up the Thoth tarot so you can see the difference. Now, obviously visually there's a huge difference between the cards, but actually the symbolism is very, very connected between the Rider-Waite and the Thoth card. Now, I mentioned in the last video about how the Tree of Life corresponds to these cards, and the Priestess is quite a unique card. She is Kether to the Temperance. So she's a bridge over the abyss, which is quite an interesting process, and I'll bring that up for you to look at as well. And one other quite interesting fact about the if we go back to the Rider-Waite High Priestess card, it actually marks out the Tree of Life on there as well. It's a very, very strong card and a very unique card. So in terms of what this means for your sort of individual journey, and I'll concentrate more on the Thoth tarot card for this, because this is what I primarily use, and I think it just gives that information a bit more clearly. This shows, so the previous card, the Magician, this shows that you have moved past the Magician. You've created your own world, but in reality it's almost putting out fires. You have the ability now. So, for example, you don't have enough money. You have the ability to manipulate the elements to bring that money, or you don't have a relationship and you want one. You have the ability to manipulate the elements to attract, to bring someone into your life. But what the priestess has started to understand and feel is that there's something much deeper to this process as well. And it's about turning inwards, stillness, almost isolation actually for some people. That's the process that I really felt with this part of the journey. To isolate yourself so that you can actually concentrate and work on what you actually want to create. It's okay being able to create, but actually it's more important to know what you want to create. And just from my experience, if you ask people, what do you want? What is your plan? I would say 80, maybe 90% of people, they might have a rough idea or some kind of vague hope, but they don't really know what they actually want. It could be, a lot of people respond with, I want to be rich. It's not really an answer, is it? That's a material thing that you want brought into your life, but what do you want? What do you actually want inside you? What is your journey? What is your path? And a lot of people don't really even make it this far on their journey. So if you've got to the priestess, you're actually doing really well. And if you actually get through this, you'll be a really balanced, calm a person with a lot of intuition, a lot of instinct, and a lot of knowledge about yourself as well. Another aspect of this journey is even basic things like what makes you happy. Why have you been doing things that make you unhappy? Is it societal pressure? Is it family? Is it relationship pressure? Is it your boss at work? Why do you do these things that you don't want to do? And then when you start to look at that in more detail, that again brings up the key question is, what do you want to do? And once you can answer that, then you can start to work on how to actually move in that direction. You've got all the knowledge to create, you just don't know what you want to create, and you just, like I said, putting out fires, money, relationship, even health, you're just putting out those fires, but there's no deeper meaning to it. So I hope that helps. I did digress at a few points there, but this is such it's such an interesting card, and I could talk about this card for an hour. There's so much information about it, but I think it's best if I keep it reasonably brief, and I think I've covered a lot of the basics. Hi and welcome back, and in this video we're going to be looking at the fourth card of the Major Arcana, which is card number 3, the Empress. Now the Empress represents creation, and that could mean a few different things. It could mean creation of art, creation of family, of relationships or love, possibly even creation of business or new creative business ideas. But whenever this card comes up in a reading, it always shows really good intuition that things are on the right path and that creation is imminent or is happening and is the right path to take. Now, if we just look at the Rider-Waite card and just briefly look at some of the symbolism on there, so we can see the Empress has a shield, and on that shield is the symbol of Venus. And you'll also notice the crown, and that has 12 stars, which is representing the 12 constellations of the zodiac. So this also ties back to, and there is definitely a connection not just with Venus, but the Sumerian goddess Inanna as well. And all of these, whether we think Empress or we think Venus, they all represent very closely related things, which is creation and love and things flowing naturally and correctly. But it also, if we put it into the context of the previous card, which was really about the internal period, to almost lock yourself away to find what you actually want to create. Well, the Empress is now showing that that period is over and you are now enjoying the sensory world, whether that's touch, taste, people, music, art, all of the things that we enjoy in our reality, and generating new things that you have a passion about. Now, if I just put this into context, and we'll just have a quick look also at the Thoth card as well, which is actually very, very different immediately, but actually quite a lot of the symbolism is connected on there as well. But now, in terms of a reading, if this comes up in, say, a love or relationship reading, then straight away, if the person was single, this would indicate to me the Empress is showing it's time to get out there and start taking action, because romance, real love is sort of within touching distance for you. And if you're already in a relationship, it would indicate that that relationship is going to become deeper, more loving, affectionate. Something on a much deeper, high level is occurring within that relationship. Now, it can also indicate pregnancy. So it's something to be aware of if you have a reading and you are single but are in this period of enjoying the world, if we want to say that. Then this card is kind of a warning of maybe take precautions, otherwise parenthood could be on the cards for you. But if it's a case that you are trying for a child, then the Empress is a fantastic card that would indicate that that is not just possible but about to happen as well. Now, in terms of money and career, it would indicate that things are flowing very well, and that financially speaking, if you were thinking of investments, then it would be the right time to start doing that, because the benefits will be there for you to reap. It always shows lots of abundance and wealth, the Empress card. And if you were thinking of changing career, then the Empress card would indicate that that would be the right thing to do, but it would usually indicate to move into something that is more creative and arts based if that's not what you're in. And as I've mentioned before about pregnancy, if I was doing a health reading, again it would be what I've just said, really, that pregnancy is a factor for you to consider and be aware of, and to either be careful and take the proper precautions, or to go ahead with your planning, because pregnancy is very likely to be occurring. Hi, welcome back, and in this video we're going to be looking at the next Major Arcana card, the fifth card, card number 4, the Emperor. So if we think back to the previous card, the Empress, the Emperor is very heavily linked to the Empress. The Empress is about fertility and things growing, experiences being enjoyed, and creation. And the Emperor is now bringing in that order, that stability and structure that is needed for things to grow to the next level. It's very important for structure to be in everyone's life. Otherwise, you can end up just sort of treading water and getting lost in your own sort of world of pleasure even. This structure is really necessary for you to reach that next higher level, whether that's in business or romance or just within your own self-work, your own path, and your own journey. So the Emperor is really bringing that structure and order into your life and your experience that you need. So if we just look at the Rider-Waite card, and obviously there's the Emperor. Now, one aspect of this card that when it comes up I always think of as maybe a slight warning is that structure and order are very important, but with some flexibility as well. If things are so heavily structured and regimented, it doesn't allow for that creation to happen. It becomes a very sterile environment. So whenever the Emperor comes up, I always give people that warning of structure, reason, order, being dependable, strength, all of those really positive aspects are there, but it needs to be reined in a little bit at times. Now, if we look at the Thoth card, just so you can see the differences, again, I work predominantly with the Thoth tarot, not the Rider-Waite, but I'm just conscious that most people use the Rider-Waite. Now, if we look at what this actually means in terms of readings, if we do the most popular aspects of reading, so love and relationships, well, if you're single and are interested in men, then this would indicate often that an older man that's going to bring order and practicability, being dependable and protective, that's going to be brought into your life. Not so heavy on the romance, but that structure and order that an older gentleman would bring into your life, it would indicate that's going to come up. And if you're single and interested in women, then it often indicates that you need to be a bit more open with your feelings, a bit more inner strength. And if there's someone in your life that you have feelings for, then pretty much bite the bullet and tell her. Don't expect her to guess. So it's about that sort of bravery and, just being honest and open. If you're in a relationship, the Emperor will show one of two things, both of them very positive. If the relationship is good, then it shows that relationship is going to be long-lasting and strong, monogamous, all of the positive things that we need in relationships. And if there's been issues in the relationship, then the Emperor will highlight that's going to begin to improve, and the stability and trust and order will be coming back. In terms of career and money, It's a very, very good card for showing that opportunities are going to be coming up, or if you are wanting things like a promotion or to have your hard work noticed to bring you the success within your job, then it shows that that's going to be coming into your life as well. In terms of sort of overall finances, it just kind of shows that you need to bring order to your spending, be a bit more responsible and practical with your finances, keep track of where your money's going, how you're spending, not to a level where you're almost being a tyrant with money, but it just shows that you maybe need to take stock of where the money's going. And finally, the third most popular, I guess, with tarot readings is health, or it is for me. It often indicates that you've been a little bit too harsh on yourself, maybe exercising too much, burning your energy levels down. Maybe just be aware of that. If there are any sort of health issues, it indicates that you need to be a bit more logical and practical in the approach to treating them, not as people often do, where kind of just suck it up and get on with it. It'll be fine kind of approach. No, if you need rest, you need rest. If you're ill, get medical treatment, get your doctor's advice, listen to it, take the medication, all those kind of things. Hello again and welcome back, and in this video we're going to be looking at the next card of the Major Arcana, which is the Hierophant. It's card number 5, but if you remember we start at 0, so it's the 6th card of the Major Arcana, even though it's number 5. So a lot of people don't like this card when it comes up, and I think that's down to a feeling that it is a representation of priests or priesthood or even the Catholic Church, and that is maybe a small part of what the card represents, but not in direct connection with that. It's basically the High Priest. Hierophant in Greek literally means High Priest. So let me just bring the Rider-Waite card up and the Thoth card as well, just so you can see the differences between the two. It's similar representation, but the Thoth card is a lot more in depth. So what this card really represents is a new way of understanding. If we think of the previous card, the Emperor, and from the Fool up to the Emperor, even though there have been changes and revelations in this journey, it's been pretty conventional, and if I can even say a low level of affecting the world around you. This card is almost sort of going behind the curtain. You are now starting to see glimpses and understanding that there is so much more to reality, that there is so much knowledge that you haven't got about how the universe works, how magic works, your own path, all of those kind of things. So the High Priest, or the Hierophant, is that next step past the Emperor, and we're now sort of delving into a new way of understanding, and that can mean pretty much every aspect of life. Now, in terms of reading, again, I'll go through the most popular. So if this comes up in a love reading, it would indicate to me something very strong and committed, like marriage, like real commitment and convention even in that relationship. If it comes up in a money or career reading, then it would show to me that this is a time to basically do what's expected of you. Don't make any sort of decisions that are a bit out of left field, or any risky decisions within business, particularly if you are part of a team within your work. It's really, do what's expected of you, do what you need to do it well, and successful will come from those conventional methods. Now, in terms of health, if it ever comes up in a health reading, if there is any health issues or concerns of health issues, then again the word convention, but that's really what this card is about. Then it would show that conventional medicine is the right approach, and that's what should be taken. But it also, in terms of health, would indicate that some kind of routine is needed, whether that's daily exercise or taking vitamins, changes to the diet, but some kind of routine needs to be adapted into your life to resolve these health issues. Hi, welcome back, and in this video we're going to be looking at the next major arcana card, which is card number 6, the Lovers. Now, I'm going to try and keep this as concise as possible because there's so much information about this card. But most people, when this card comes up, immediately think of romance and love and partnership. And that's not really what this card is about. It can be in some cases, but that's really more the Two of Cups that is a representation of that. This card for me is really about a crossroads, a period where a decision has to be made. Almost metaphorically, you have to choose to go left or right. You can't stay in the middle anymore. So if we bring up the Rider-Waite card, again, you know, the most popular tarot deck that's used. And if we look at this card, we can see there's the representation of Adam and Eve on the card. And we also have the Tree of Life and the Tree of Knowledge on there as well. Now, interestingly, on the older tarot cards, so pre-Rider-Waite, the Lovers would actually be two women, and there would be a male character in the middle of them. So that's almost, again, sort of clearly showing the representation of having to make that choice. As I said, you know, picking left or right. But that's really what this card represents. Now, if we think back to the previous card, the Hierophant, which is about that period where someone has started to see behind the curtain, see the mechanics of the universe, experience things that we were told aren't possible. The Lovers is about the next step. What are you going to do next? Do you stop? Do you continue? Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, it's really a personal journey, but most people, if they do even make it this far, they do stop at around this point, because the decisions that you have to now make will have massive implications on the rest of your life. If you think about most people in society, particularly in Western societies now, it's a very fast culture. It's very it's very based around temporary things that will bring immediate satisfaction, immediate pleasure, but it doesn't really bring any nourishment to the soul, to the journey, to the experience of life. But that's kind of what we're trapped in, and that's where that decision has to be made. Do we stick with the things that we are told that we need, told that we want, the traditional experience of a corporate job, and you climb up the ladder and you work for 50 years and then get a gold watch at the end, and then you retire, go fishing and die? Or, you know, striving to have, a house and a nice car with 2.5 children, and you have a set routine Monday to Friday, and then you have a set routine on the weekend, but you never really push past any of those surface things. And that's the really hard decision that anybody on this journey has to make, that I've had to make. I did work in a corporate job for many years, and I hated it. It made me ill at times. I couldn't face another meeting about something that I just had no interest in. I would daydream all day. I was distracted. I'd look out the window. I wasn't listening. I was not a good employee at all. And I had to make that choice. Do I push myself into this experience, into magic, into my true journey, my true self? And I made the decision to do that, and it cost me a lot. Financially, friendships, family, relationships even. It stripped a lot of things away, but I don't regret it. It was hard, but that was the decision that I had to make. It was essential for me to continue this journey. But most people will stop, and I will never criticize them, because it's a very hard decision to make. But I do remember being told a lot of times that certain things are impossible. You can't do this, you can't do that. And I say to those people, and I'm paraphrasing an old saying, but those that say that something can't be done should get out of the way of people that are doing it. And that's a very important saying to me, and I hopefully think to a lot of other people as well, that when people say something isn't possible, it's often just their experience. The limitations of each of us is a lot higher than what we're told on a very regular basis. Anyway, coming back to the card, as I say, it's about the decision, the path that you are now going to take. You've come quite far in the journey. You've reached a point where you've experienced things that you were told were completely impossible. But what do you do next? Can you go back to normal life? Normal in quotation marks. Do you go back to normal life? Can you ignore it? Do you push further into it? And that's the decision that everyone on this path has to make at some point. But as I say, most people don't even get this far. And most people that do get this far stop at this point. So anyone that gets to the next card, you've done very, very well and come very far on the journey, in my opinion. Now, interestingly, just one other thing about this card. The four major archangels, Raphael, Michael, Gabriel and Uriel. Now, they're all represented at different points within the major arcana cards, apart from Uriel, for reasons I'll go into at another time. But this card is the representation of Raphael, the archangel of the East. And if you know anything about Raphael, you'll probably straight away see the connection from what I've told you about what this card represents. But anyway, I've kept it as brief as possible. There's so much more information to this card, but I would encourage you to look into it yourself and really dig into what this card means and where you are within connection to this card as well, because that's a very important part to your spiritual journey. Hi, so we've now made it as far as the Chariot, which is card number 7 within the major arcana, the 8th card. If you remember, we start at 0. I know I say that every time. And when this card comes up for me in readings, it always shows something to do with overcoming conflict, with willpower, determination to keep moving forward, to push in that direction even if it's challenging. And if I just bring the card up, the Rider-Waite card, there's some very interesting symbolism on the card. Now, if we look at the front of the Chariot, you'll see that there's sort of a disc with a hole and sort of a peg that's pushed through it. And above that, we've got the wings. Now, that symbolises the two opposites, and that would be the male and female energies, and that's bringing them together as a whole. And interestingly as well, above that, just above his head, we have the stars, and that's representing the universe. Now, if you just look down to the front of the Chariot, you'll see that there are two Sphinx that are pulling the Chariots. And this is really clear symbolism of what this card is about. But you'll notice that the Sphinx don't have any reins attached to them. So he's driving the Chariot forward. He's pushing it in the direction that he wants it to go in, just by sheer willpower, by determination and strength of mind. That's how he's driving the Chariot to where he wants it to go. So in terms of the journey, which is signified through the major arcana, if we think back to the Lovers, and that card, just in sort of very brief basic terms, is symbolizing that you are in a place where you need to make that choice, where you will either stop or you will continue. So the Chariot is, you've now continued, but you're actually starting to realize that this isn't really fun, possibly not even enjoyable. It's very hard work, but you can't go back. You cannot unknow what you know now and what you've experienced. So you can't go back to what you used to do and how you used to perceive reality and the universe. But it's very, very challenging and very hard work. But as we can see in the symbolism of the card, you need to power through. You need to use that strength of will, that willpower to go further. And for me, that means daily practice, serious daily practice, not on a more casual level of a few times a week or once a week, once a month. You're now in that phase where it's daily. It's part of your life, part of your daily routine. And that takes real dedication and can be very isolating, can be quite lonely, very challenging, mentally draining as well. But for anyone that wants to get through to the next phase, into the next card, the next part of this experience, you just need to get your head down and just work, use that willpower. I kind of liken it to, imagine you go to the gym 7 days a week. Now, you will physically see the benefits, you will feel the benefits, but to do that over a long period of time is going to be very, very challenging. There will be days, if not multiple days, where you will wake up and make excuses to not get out of bed and go to the gym. You don't want to get on the treadmill, you don't want to be lifting weights, you don't want to be doing whatever exercise it is that you're doing. But the more that you just push through, don't think about the actual task, just push through and just get on with it. And that's really how I experienced this phase, was just get my head down, work and work and work until I sort of, came through the clouds, so to speak. Now, a lot of people, more than the previous card, the Lovers, a lot of people, when they get to this phase, do stop. And that is primarily, from my experience, because they discover the quite painful knowledge, but it's knowledge at least, that they don't have the discipline, they don't have the willpower to actually push themselves into this period of daily practice. and I don't criticize those people. Anyone that has come as to whether this card or even the previous card, you've achieved something that most humans never do. Whatever the percentage is, most people do not get to this phase. But we're all unique. Some people just do not have the discipline within them, unfortunately. But for those of you that do, it's really, really beneficial. Hi, welcome back, and in this video we're going to be looking at the next major Arcana tarot card, which is Strength. Now, just to very quickly mention, and this isn't really what the video is about, so I'll be very brief with it, and this is also sort of heavily disputed and quite complicated, but this is the first time that we're seeing the cards not follow the exact same order within different decks. So, for example, in the Rider-Waite deck, this is card number 8, and in the Thoth deck, which I have in front of me here, it's not only card number 11, but it's called Lust as well. And just for that change in the order, just very briefly, it's thought to be the sort of main recognized explanation for this is that this change puts the cards into the correct astrological order within certain belief systems. Now, if we remember back to what the Major Arcana is, it's basically telling the story of the Fool, the journey of the Fool even, and that movement through the 3 different planes of existence. So we have the first phase, which is the material plane, then we have the mind plane, and then we have the spiritual plane. Now, moving these cards within the deck doesn't really change the meaning. Both journeys still make sense. They're basically the same story, just being told very slightly differently, and it really depends on your preference. I personally prefer to actually move the Strength card within Thoth to the number 8th place, and move the 8th card in Thoth, which is Judgement, up to the 11th place. That's just how I feel that it works better for me. If you want to know more on this, I can't recommend highly enough a book by Rachel Pollock, and it's called The 78 Degrees of Wisdom. It's a really, really fantastic book on tarot, but it explains this issue in a much more intelligent and eloquent way than I ever could. Anyway, let's have a look at the Rider-Waite card first, and if you'll just pay attention to what the woman is actually doing on the card and how she's interacting with the lion. So we can see that she's not just closing the lion's mouth, but she isn't really using physical strength or aggression to do that. She's gently closing its mouth, and she's gentle, but she's still dominating the lion. So she's gentle and humble, but also dominating and taking charge. So if we put that into the context of readings, whenever this card comes up for me, it always signifies either a successful conclusion, victory, triumph, inner power, strength, obviously. And if we think of the context of this card, so we've gone from the previous card, the Chariot, which is about harnessing that inner strength and will, but it's doing it in a very, very strict and very almost aggressive manner. This card is telling you that you've moved past that period. Remember, this is a higher card than the Chariot. We are one phase further on within this journey. It's basically telling you not to be so harsh on yourself. Yes, you still need that discipline. Yes, you still need to be focused and committed to the work, but you can do it in a much more gentle way. And I think maybe the best description of this card is strength isn't always force. Strength can be gentle, and it can be very peaceful and kind. So, quite a complicated card, particularly the placement and the history of the card. But I hope that makes sense. Look into this in more detail if you'd like to know more about why cards are in certain places in specific decks, like the Rider-Waite deck or the Toth deck. It's very interesting, the different approaches and the sort of the thinking behind that, the theory behind it. Hi, so we've now reached the Hermit card number 9 of the Major Arcana, and for me it has a very strong resemblance to one of the earlier cards, the High Priestess. So if I just bring up the Rider-Waite version of this card, and for me this card is really about withdrawing from the world, looking internally for answers within, and that's very strongly connected to what the High Priestess card is. Now if we just look at the actual card itself, and there is some school of thought, and I personally agree with it, that the Hermit card is actually the Fool after he's grown older and wiser, and the Lantern is a representation of the past experiences, and he's using this Lantern or these past experiences to guide him forward. Now, withdrawing from the world again and looking internally, as I've mentioned, is pretty much what the earlier card, the High Priestess, is. But this time it's going to be a very different process. It comes from a place of much higher frequency and much more experience and knowledge now. And I think I've mentioned before, but all of the journey of the Major Arcana, it does follow a cycle that does repeat quite often, and it's often either outward force or inward attention. So if we think back to the previous two cards, the Chariot and Strength, they are really about the external, whereas now we're moving back into a period for self-reflection. And I wouldn't say that this period has to be permanent, certainly not permanent, or even for a particularly long time. But for anyone that reaches this point, if you don't completely cut the outside world out at this point, and I mean that energetically, you won't be able to go any further than this point. You have to turn that energy inwards, and you have to take the concentration away from the outside world. And I always associate this card and this period with when you are starting something like the Abramelin ritual or any of the HGA rituals and work. That's a period where you really do have to turn inwards. It's very time consuming. You can't allow the external to dominate or take your energy away, because you have to concentrate on this work. And I always associate this kind of experience as well with, just going back, 3-4 years now, the COVID lockdowns, when we were all shut away, and a lot of people completely collapsed during this period, and a lot of people really thrived as well. And those people that were able to actually turn their attention internally to just focus on the inside, the self, really flew through it, and yeah, like I say, really thrived during that period. And I think a lot of the people that really struggled, and it was very educational for me, the first lockdown, because I did struggle at first. that need for constant communication, connection, that fear of just being alone with your own thoughts, your own inner work that you need to do. A lot of people couldn't and still can't do that, but I see it as something that's absolutely essential to everyone's journey, particularly within magic, but just in life in general. Hi, we've now reached the Wheel of Fortune card. So what this card is representing is change. And if we just bring up the card, because there is a lot of interesting symbolism on the card, the first thing that you will notice, apart from the wheel in the centre, are the four corners. And in the four corners we have the lion, the bull, the man and the eagle. And these are the four fixed signs of the zodiac. So we have Aquarius, Leo, Taurus and Scorpio. And one thing about these four constellations is that the stars from these, when they aren't being blocked out by the sun or by clouds, these can be seen all year round. Now, what this card is really about is change. And we've come from the Hermit phase, and basically the conclusions that you've come to during that phase, the epiphanies, the decisions, the changes that you have decided upon, this is now the phase that you are starting to bring these into your life, into the outer world from the inner. And it really does follow, but in a slightly deeper way, the transition from the High Priestess, which is internal, to the Empress, which is bringing what you want and shaping your life in the direction that you want it to. And it is really about that change, that you've now brought these new conclusions. You've had these solutions or conclusions in your mind, and these aren't affected now by anybody external. That's one of the main differences between this phase and the previous one with the High Priestess to the Empress. It's even more about you, your journey, not anybody else, but your true higher self and the path that you have to take to keep going. And we've now reached the Justice card, which very closely follows on from the previous card, the Wheel of Fortune. Now, when you've reached the point of the Justice card, it basically means that you've got to a point where you do not care what anybody says. You do not care what anybody thinks or advises you or tries to influence you. You are now on a higher level. You're not working on emotion, you're working on intellect, and you're really starting to follow your own true path, your higher path. So let's just quickly look at the card. And the main representation of this on the card is the sword that she's holding. Now, when I say that you don't care what people think, it's a little bit deeper than that. And I think I might have mentioned this before, but the vast majority of people don't think. They follow emotional programs. They follow what other people tell them to do or think, whether that's religion, friends, family, social media influences that we have nowadays. When you've reached the point of the Justice card, you're now the opposite, and you are starting to cut out anything that doesn't serve your higher purpose. And you are acting on intellect. and being analytical and truly thinking, the emotional part is not necessary anymore. And cutting things out that don't serve your higher goal can be a challenge for some people. But once you've truly reached this phase, whether it's relationships, friendships, possessions, career, whatever it can be, that needs to be removed for you to continue this journey, it isn't that painful because it is necessary, and you know that. So that's really what the sword and the card itself really represents. It's cutting out the unnecessary from an analytical and intellectual standpoint, and progressing forward onto the true higher path that you are taking. So we've now reached the Hanged Man card number 12, the 13th card of the Major Arcana. And if I was going to boil this card down to, in essence, just one word, I would use the word sacrifice. For me, it's a card about surrender, about change, and about metamorphosis, but it's really about sacrifice. And if we just look at the card, now, the name itself, I think, immediately brings some negative connotations to it. But if we actually look at what's happening on the card and what it's representing, it's reasonably positive. In fact, I think it is positive. He's not hanging by his neck. He's hanging by his foot. He has a smirk or maybe even a slight smile on his face. He has the halo around his head as well. And if we look at how he's actually hanged, it's by one foot. And he could very easily unhang himself. He could release himself from the rope. So that's very, representational of what this card is actually about as well. Now, if we think back to the Justice card, and that card was about, or partly about, cutting off what is not needed. And I always think predominantly that is, within personal relationships, that is a big aspect of that card. And if you think, the energy of the people that you surround yourself with is really what you also become. So the Justice card is about setting in motion that cutting things off in a very methodical way. And the sacrifice is, now with the Hanged Man, that you are going to implement this. You are going to cut off all of these things that are stopping you from moving forward and achieving higher states. And that is a very painful process. Giving up what holds you back, even if it does hurt and is painful, it will ultimately bring gain to your life. It will bring something higher and better and more suited to you and your journey. But that process, can be very challenging to let go of, say, childhood friends, people that you are close to, but that relationship is, maybe very surface and doesn't bring you any higher meaning or nourishment. Now, in terms of readings, and I'll just quickly cover, the sort of major topics for readings. In relationships and love, I always see this card relating to loss, that letting go, sacrifice again, and change. And this change in terms of relationships or love is going to come whether you accept it or not. Any issues, any problems will come to the forefront, they'll come to a head. Now, that does leave the possibility for a clean start, a new beginning, but you will have to go through that process to get to that point. Now, in terms of career, it's a card really of, I would say, conflict and uncertainty, change that is needed but might be very difficult to implement. And finances, again, change. A change in method or perspective is needed within your approach to finances. Otherwise, no progress is going to be made. You're going to end up just being repeatedly stuck financially. So we have now reached the Death card. Now, I'm sure that you're all aware by now that the Death card does not mean the actual physical death of a person or living creature. It's not really as it's portrayed in things like horror films, where it's scary and it means, death and negative things. If I was going to sum up this card in one word, I would use the word change. But if I was going to use two words, the second word I would use would be ending. It means the ending of something major in your life. So if we just look at the card itself, and what we can see in terms of the symbolism, we can see the priest, we can see the maiden, we can see the king are all on the card. And what this is showing, what this is representing, is basically that no matter how rich, young, beautiful, successful, spiritual a person is, change dash ending is going to affect everybody. It's a part of the journey, it's a part of life. And no matter where you are within your life, how secure you may feel, how great you may feel, how powerful, it will happen to everybody at some point. And as I mentioned, that change or ending will be the death of something major in your life. That could be ranging from something to do with work, something to do with particularly relationships, or even relationships to yourself or close friends. It basically means that something has to end so that you can move forward. Something is holding you back that's very major. So in terms of the Major Arcana journey, if you remember, the cards of the Major Arcana take us through a very specific process and journey. This, in my experience, and I'll come to that a little bit later when I absolutely experienced the death card for probably the first time in my life. This basically means that you will stop pursuing the things that most people pursue. And by that I mean what I would probably call, maybe slightly harshly, the superficial things. The things that aren't really nourishing you but take up a majority of interactions. You're basically now in a position where you understand that life is very short. It's a very fleeting process. And you can't really give time to meaningless things. We all have a goal, and I would estimate or guess that 99% of people don't really understand this, or don't even know that they have a goal, that we all have a personal journey within life. So when you reach this stage, you really do realize and start to feel how empty most interactions are. When you hang out with friends and you just chatting about nothing, and that used to bring you a lot of comfort and joy and connection. Now you're at a stage where you kind of feel that it's just wasting time, and that you would much rather be doing something else that is actually meaningful. Now, just to sort of explain the process of magic work and the work of a magician, we basically have 3 different stages. We have neophyte, adept, and master. So neophyte basically translates to newly begun. A complete beginner, someone that is either right at the beginning of the journey and just has a passing interest, or when you're at that stage of, learning some of the beginner rituals and practices, learning the lesser banishing, all of those kind of things. An adept is someone that has learnt these things, not just learnt them but understands them. They can do them forwards and backwards. They know them so well. They've put them into practice. They've started shaping their reality successfully in the direction that they want to. That is an adept. And to a neophyte, an adept can seem like a master. But the difference between an adept and a master is great. It's huge. And a master is basically someone that has crossed the abyss. They understand the human condition in great detail. And basically we aren't as complex as we often think we are. We can put most human behaviours, nearly all human behaviours in my opinion, down to 2 things. We act on ego or the higher self. And someone that is a master of magic not just knows this, but really understands and has experienced both of these 2 different paths. So basically, when you get to the death card, when you get to this stage within the journey, you are certainly at a stage within the adept period. And that means that you are now, going inwards, and you're really committing to the journey. You're stopping wasting time basically on anything that is holding you back from this journey, that is superficial to you. So the journey itself and the experiences is now the focus. And I think it was, what year was it? 2015, so 9 years ago, I certainly experienced, and I wasn't practicing magic anywhere near as intensely as what I do now, but I knew the basics. I wasn't an out practitioner, so it was mostly, a very secretive thing that I did, but I knew the basics. I knew how to do certain things, and I would do them, in private basically. And then in a very short space of time, and in hindsight, it did not feel like it at the time, but in a very short space of time, a very close friend suddenly passed away. Someone that I worked with and was a friend, just suddenly wasn't there anymore. My cat, who I was very, very close with, and was very privileged to give him a great life and have great experiences with him. He unfortunately passed away. And then my 12-year relationship came to a cataclysmic end, like comical. It was so chaotic and bad. And I lost a lot of friends because of that breakup, because we'd grown up together pretty much, and we're sort of part of the same friend circle, and just all of this chaos. Oh, and I lost one of my jobs at the time as well. So, and this was it, within weeks, all of this happened. And it really felt like, my life was over. Like, this is it. I cannot go on any further. This is so destructive. This is so painful and hurtful and upsetting that, like, I can't ever recover from this. But with hindsight, and, you know, more life experience now, this period was essential for me to break out of the safe box that I was in. Life was not nourishing me. I wasn't able to openly practice magic. My music career was kind of stuck in an area that I didn't want to be in. The relationship was not actually what I wanted. It wasn't nourishing me either. It was just convenient, and that, you know, common fear that we all have of, you know, I don't want to be alone. And that's not being disrespectful to this person. It you know, evidently wasn't right for both of us, and, you know, had reached its conclusion maybe a year or two before the actual before the car crashed into the wall, so to speak. But out of that, I had to be reborn. I had to start again pretty much from scratch. I didn't know how to really form outside relationships. Outside of what I'd been in for the last 12 years. I didn't really know or have the courage to be me. I couldn't, you know, whether it was magic or just personality or music. I'd sort of just been trapped in this box, and it wasn't pleasant. And, you know, hopefully I won't go through something that intense again, but who knows, you know, who knows what life is going to bring. But it was absolutely worth it, because I'm much more balanced. I'm much more in touch with myself. I'm just much happier than what I was during, you know, that period in 2015, and, you know, maybe through parts of 2016 as well. So that for me is very relevant to the death card, and this point of the journey within our experience and magic and the great work, if you want to call it that. So that was the death cards, and I shared a few personal things there, but I think it's very relevant of this part of the journey. And if you are experiencing this, or, you know, you have gone through it in the past, you know, it's hard. It's very, very challenging, but it's also essential for you to grow and actually be more, you know, in line with your true self. So we've now reached card number 14 of the Major Arcana, the Temperance card. And if I was to do what I've done with previous cards, which is to just bring the essence of the card, the meaning of the card, into just a few words, I would say this card represents patience, it represents moderation, but the most important word for this card, in my opinion, is balance. That's really what this card represents. Now, if we just look at the Rider-Waite card, and if you remember previously I mentioned that the archangels are represented within the Major Arcana, and I believe we've previously had Raphael. We now have Michael. That's who is in this card. And one of the things about balance and moderation and patience is that these things aren't particularly exciting, but they are incredibly powerful things to have. And one of the ways that this power is being shown and represented in the card is that the wings of Michael don't even fit onto the card. They don't fit into the image. They're so big and powerful. And if we look at what he's doing, on first glance you may think that he's pouring the water down into the bottom cup, but actually what he's doing is pouring the water from the bottom cup up into the top cup. And what this is showing is that once you've mastered this moderation, this balance within your life, that what you are able to do will appear as miraculous. And actually, it's just you being able to have that balance, being able to master and work with the elements around you to manipulate reality into the way that you want it to be, or more in line with what you want it to be. Now, if we just look at the Thoth card, and the imagery is obviously just it is a little bit different, but there is something interesting on this card that I just want to highlight, and that is the white lion and the red eagle. Now, what this is representing, again, it all comes back to balance, but in the sort of traditions of alchemy, sulfur and mercury are two of the basic ingredients, but when you merge them together correctly, you can turn them into gold. And this is really symbolic of the opposing, the opposites coming together to bring balance. So king, queen, red, white, sun, moon, fire, water, male, female, dry, wet, all of these things are in opposition, but when brought together correctly, bring harmony and balance. Now, just about the card itself and how this represents where you are on the journey, before you reach this stage, you weren't balanced. You can't have been balanced. You might have been becoming more and more adept at magic, more in tune with yourself, more aligned with your journey. But you would go through phases of, say, you would focus on magic for a week. That would be all that you would focus on. It would be everything that you think of, every bit of energy goes into it. But then you would become obsessed with something else for a little while. Something else would catch your eye or get your attention, whether it's work or something music related or relationship related, but something else would pull you away. And you would have that swing that I've mentioned many times before of inward, outward. And what I mean by that is something internal. So you go through a stage of magic, but then something from the outside world takes all of that focus, that obsession. And when you're doing that, you're not in balance. So when somebody is really balanced, they don't need to swing. They don't become obsessed with things. They just have part of their daily routine. It's quiet, it's patient, but it's very, very powerful. And that's really the essence of what this card is showing and where you would be on your journey. And once someone actually reaches this point, people around you will notice. As Aleister Crowley says, let success be thy proof. And as I say, once you reach this point, people won't just notice, but they will feel that difference. They will feel almost inspired by you. They'll be confused, like, why are you so successful? Why does everything work for you? Why are you so calm when I'm freaking out about this and you're completely calm, and then it turns out to be completely fine? How are you at this point? You're at this point because you've gone through the journey to this point, and you've now brought this quiet, calm, balanced energy into your life. Now, one other aspect just to bring into it as well is that the practice side, the magical practice side, is something that is just naturally part of your daily life now. It isn't something that needs, large amounts of ceremony, and you don't need to be visible. You don't need to make people aware of what you do. However you do it, you get up, you do some stretches, have a coffee, and do your meditation work in the morning, and then get on with your day, and then do whatever you're working on during the evening, possibly something like that, where it's just part of your routine, and it's another further step from the outside influence that is holding you back. As I've mentioned before in previous cards, conversations that don't go anywhere, experiences that don't really go anywhere, doing things for the sake of doing them. You're not involved in that aspect of life really anymore. Everything that you do is for a higher purpose, to nourish you, to help you on your journey, to bring knowledge and experience. So we've now reached the Devil card. Now this card can be summed up in 2 words: addiction and enslavement. Now by addiction, that doesn't necessarily mean what most people would immediately go to, which would be drug or alcohol addiction. If we think that most people are in one of 2 states, they're either chasing physical pleasure or they're running away from something that will effectively make them feel bad. Whenever you're in this kind of mentality, then I would say that you are enslaved to some form of addiction. So that could be just a pursuit of physical pleasure, it could be food, it could be drugs, alcohol, sex, but something that is controlling you, something that is an addictive part of your personality that is dictating how you think, how you behave. Now if we just look at the card, and as usual we'll go to the Rider-Waite card first because that's the most common. One of the key aspects that we can see on this card is that yes, the people are bound with chains, but the chains are not tying their hands or legs or arms up. They're around their necks, and they can easily take these chains off their necks. So just think about what that means. It basically is showing that when you are within this stage of the journey, that you might be enslaved by something, or you probably are enslaved by something, but you can easily remove these chains yourself. You can free yourself from this enslavement. Now, this card and this period of the journey, it also heavily ties into the higher guardian angel ritual in process, the HGA. And this, I would say, a lot of people get intimidated by rituals like this because they believe that it's a very advanced stage, but it really isn't. For someone that's reached the level of adept, to put it in the context of life progression, this would be sort of teenage, puberty kind of stage of the actual whole process. But one aspect of the HGA ritual is that you, at some point, you need to invoke the 7 major demonic forces that are represented as things like lust, greed, gluttony. So for example, Asmodeus, Mammon, and you bind them. You bind them so that they are no longer able to exert an influence over your life and control you. So another aspect of where you are and what this card is representing is that you are starting to see and understand and take control of your addictions. You're no longer being pulled by lust, by wrath, anger, by greed, by money, the pursuit of money just for the sake of it. You're actually starting to see how these things influence you, how they influence your life, your thinking, your behaviour, and you're starting to remedy these enslavements. So when this card comes up in readings, I always think of it as showing that you are being dominated in some aspects, particularly by a concentration on the pleasures of the material world, luxuries, if you want to call it that, the physical pleasures that we all need and are important to everyone's life, but can also dominate a lot of people's lives and can really take control, whether that's a quest for power, greed, material possessions just for the sake of it to dominate other people. But what actually happens is you are allowing these things to actually dominate you. And it's kind of a warning card that you need to take a step back and actually process and analyze these aspects of your life so that you can move through them and past them. It really also ties heavily into what we call shadow work. A lot of these addictions or enslavements are actually part of our shadow, and that's a very difficult process for a lot of people to go through. And if you want to stay in that period, that's absolutely fine. But once you have reached this stage and gained all of this knowledge, then you always have a choice, but you really do have a choice of, do I actually face these things, this shadow side of myself, or do I pull back and just allow them to dominate me and my life? So that's the choice that you have to effectively make at this point. The Tower Tarot card. Now, straight away, this card brings a lot of fear and apprehension when it comes up in readings, and it really does have a very bad reputation. Out of all of the tarot cards, the Tower card seems to be the one card that people absolutely dread when it comes up in readings, and there's a reason for that. This card represents destruction, and not a mild destruction. This is a catastrophic destruction where you will feel like your life will never recover, that your life is ending basically. But really, what this actually represents is the destruction of things that are holding you back. And that can be many things. It can be aspects of yourself, it can be a relationship, it can be the job that you have, the career that you have, it can be all manner of things. But if things are holding you back from progressing, the Tower card will show absolute destruction of that. And people often resist it, but the more you resist, the more it seems to hurt. You have to allow this destruction to actually happen and take place, and you can actually move forward. So another aspect of this card is the destruction of ego. So we all take the major arcana journey, sometimes multiple times, sometimes we only get a few cards in, but we are all on this journey in our lifetime. And the destruction of the ego is really essential to this journey so that you can actually start to experience life in that connected way. The ego is stripped away and you start to understand and really feel that connection to the universe, to everything around you, how everything is interconnected. But that is also a very painful aspect for a lot of people. They desperately hold on to the ego and fight this process, or just don't progress with it at all. But it is essential so that you can then regrow from a more balanced and divine, if you want to use that word, human perspective. I think a good metaphor to explain the purpose of this card would be to think of planting a seed. And what happens if you think from the perspective of the seed is you take a seed and you push it into the ground, and that seed is in darkness, it's isolated, it's alone, it's away from light. Plants, trees, they love light, they need it to grow, to blossom. But at first that seed is completely isolated and pushed into the dark. we think of that, metaphorically as the Tower card showing the destruction of the ego, the destruction of these things that you might find or feel are very important to you in your life being destroyed and taken away. But what happens? That seed pushes through. It starts to grow, it starts to blossom, it comes into the light, and it grows into what it should be, what it wants to be. And I think that's a really fitting metaphor for anyone that pulls the tarot card out or is going through this particular phase and feels absolute terror and fear. Like, oh my God. Just think of, well, yes, this is going to be a transitional period. This is going to be very difficult for you, but it's also going to make you grow. It's going to make you grow into where you need to be, the direction that you should be going in, and you will ultimately be much more happier and will be in a place in your life where you wouldn't be if you hadn't gone through this process. So we've finally reached the star. We've gone through a period of some quite challenging cards, and particularly the Tower is probably the most challenging. And we've finally come out of that and reached the star. Now, I would say in one word, as I often do in these videos, if I was going to use one word for this card, it would be renewal. Renewal of hope, renewal of faith, renewal of life. That's really what this card is about. Now, if we just look at the card, the Rider-Waite one, we can see here that she's pouring water onto the ground, giving it renewed life. And that's really representing, exactly what this card is actually about. It's almost blessing the land. That's really what the card is actually showing. And it's interestingly showing a few other things as well. It's showing the union of the elements, earth and water being combined. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we have 7 stars on there, and that is representing the planetary energies that we work with within magic, the Sun, Venus, Mercury, etc. But yes, it really is about life outside of the Tower. We've gone through that period, we've come out, and we're experiencing life really for the first time outside of the ego. And you understand even the previous experiences that the Tower period was actually a blessing. And you'll also start to realize that this period is very rare. Most people don't experience this. A very tiny percentage really experience this, to experience life without ego, to be in this divine state, to not just feel but have that connection. It really is a very special time and is a blessing. Now, in terms of readings, it's very, very clear what this card would mean in readings. It would be a rebirth. It would be a renewal of whether it's creativity, of a passion for life, of relationships, of work, business, etc. It really does just represent that new burst of life that you will be going through during this period. It's a very positive card, and I think that's welcomed, particularly on the journey, the Major Arcana journey, that once you actually get to the star, you've gone through so many challenging things that when you actually reach this point, you really do feel blessed and just feel differently about life. You even walk differently, think differently, feel differently. It's a great period to be in. The Moon card. So we've finally got to a place in the previous card, the Star, where we're actually in a period of light, where enjoying life, we're feeling connected and fulfilled. And now we're straight back into the darkness. And for a lot of people, that will sort of bring questions of what on earth is going on, why am I back here? But what this is really representing in terms of the journey is that it is not complete. A lot of people, when they reach the point of the previous card, the Star, they will feel that the journey is actually complete for a period because they're so connected, they're so balanced and happy and enjoying life. But then they'll start to have questions. I don't fully understand this. I don't quite know what this means. And it's really showing that the journey is not anywhere near complete yet. Now, let me bring up the card because there's a lot of symbolism on this card that's quite important. Now, the first thing to look at, if we look at the dog and the wolf that are howling at the moon, now this is representing that we can often get things confused. So in a period of darkness, you may mix up a friendly dog and a ravenous wolf, or a ravenous wolf and a friendly dog. So just think about what that symbolically could mean. You'll also see at the bottom of the card is a crayfish, and it's mostly still in the water, but it is partly on the land. Now, what this is representing is basically things that we fear, and when we actually see them complete and whole, then they're almost always not as scary or destructive or as damaging as what we actually think they are. Really, the things that we should be a lot more cautious of are the things that are actually unseen. They're often the things that are the most damaging and cause the most hurt or damage, destruction, etc. We have the path going through the middle, and it's been illuminated by the moon as well. So there's some pretty clear symbolism in the card. The crayfish maybe not so clear what it actually represents, but that's what I feel the crayfish actually represents. And all of these things are really about the subconscious, intuition, subconscious, the internal, the shadow side. As I mentioned before, the Star card, the previous card, often feels like the end of the journey when you actually get there. What the Moon card is now showing is that you've got a lot more to go on this journey, a lot more to learn, a lot more to experience, and you will intuitively, again, the Moon really, I think, has a lot of connection to intuition. You will intuitively start to think and question things that you don't understand, that you haven't experienced, that your journey is not complete, and what do I need to do to actually get to that point where the journey is finally complete, and then we can start it again. So, as I mentioned about intuition, so the moon is representing light in darkness. It brings clarity and helps guide you. So that's the path that we can see through the middle, and it's been illuminated by the moon. In terms of readings, the moon card with love and relationship readings has a bit of a reputation for showing infidelity, cheating, affairs, etc. And I don't really think that that is correct. I think it does imply that something is hidden, but that could be subconscious, or it could even be not deliberately hiding something. It could be, for example, you're still tormented by a relationship of the past and it's affecting the current relationship, or there's communication issues and you're not communicating on a level where you actually understand each other. But I don't think that jumping immediately to infidelity, cheating is really correct with this card. It can, obviously the cards that are drawn with it would have an influence on that, but immediately I don't really think so. With financial and business career readings, I again would say that this card would show to have some hesitation with making any financial decisions, investing, buying property, things like that. I would say hold off if this card comes up in a reading. And with work, it often shows that things are not being communicated properly, things are being hidden, things are usually quite tense. So it, for me, it always shows that you should take maybe a step back, find maybe a different path or your own path, and then things will present themselves in a more illuminated fashion and you can proceed. So we've now reached the Sun card. Now, this card is the polar opposite of the previous card, the Moon. This card is really about joy, success, life becoming easy, and also knowing your will and starting to really pursue it as well. Now, if we look at the card, we'll look at the Rider-Waite card first. The symbolism on the card is pretty self-explanatory, so I won't particularly bore you with the details of the card itself, but one thing that always comes to mind when I encounter this card is one of Aleister Crowley's quotes, which is, "Thou hast no right but to do your will." So what I believe he means by that is that everybody, every single person alive, everybody that has been alive, does actually have their place within the universe. They have their own journey, things to accomplish, their own will, so to speak. And we're all very unique. We may be similar in some ways, but we all have that unique journey, that unique experience. And I think by "thy has no right" is that is what you should be doing. Regardless of what people's opinions are, regardless of pressure from outside, from society, you have your will, and that's what you should be doing. And when you do that, when you reach this point within the journey, you reach the Sun card, you just feel that life is joyful, it's fun, it's easy. Even during the harder times, you will still be enjoying life in all aspects because you're doing what you came here to do. And that's a really, really magical and very special and unique time for people as well. Very, very few people get this far into the journey. Think about it yourself. Do you actually know your will? Do you know your true purpose? There's nothing wrong with saying no, but if not, and you would like to know, then you would need to go through this journey and get to this point. What you will also notice is when you get to this point and you are accomplishing your will, you are enacting your will, you are doing your purpose, and your life is full of joy and fun, it will feel like the universe itself is almost pushing you through this. Obstacles that would usually hold you back or would bother you or cause you problems just won't be there anymore. Life will just become so much easier and so much faster as well. Now, in terms of readings, again, it's pretty self-explanatory with this card. With relationship readings, if you're single, it would show that a time of joy is coming up, a time of fun and excitement. So a new exciting relationship is imminent. If you're in a relationship, it would probably show that you've been through some difficult times, but now you've come through that and you're going to go through a period of real joy and real bonding and fun, which is what I personally think all relationships really want to achieve, is that fun, easy life with somebody else where everything just flows. In terms of business, again, pretty self-explanatory. It would be a great time for investments, for pursuing certain things that you want to within business, because things are going to open up for you. It's going to be a really easy time for you. The Judgement card. So we are finally getting very close to the end of this journey through the major arcana. And this card is really about resurrection, awakening, and rebirth. Now, particularly in Western culture, the term judgment has immediate negative connotations, but that's really not what this card is about. There's nothing negative in this card whatsoever. So let's look at the Rider-Waite card, and let's just look at the symbolism that is on there. So we have right across the top of this card, we have one of the archangels, and this is Gabrielle. And you can see that she is blowing the trumpet, and that is making the dead rise out of their graves. We have the man, woman, and child, and then we have more people in the background as well that are rising out of their graves. So what this is really representing in terms of the journey is a new life. And if we think back to the previous cards, particularly the Death card, that's really about the things that most people are pursuing are meaningless to you. And you've now got to a point where you've cut out pretty much all of these things that are no longer connected to your goal, to your will, to your life. And in the previous card, the Sun, you'd reached that point and started to actually enact your will, to actually put this into action. Now you are metaphorically and actually in life actually being reborn. I don't quote the Bible too often, but when Jesus refers to born again, that's really what he means. You're being reborn into a new life and a new way of existence and a new way of thinking and acting within your life. So we could look at the Judgment card as a representation of your old life dying, and you are now reborn or resurrected even into your new life. And a bit more representation within the symbolism of the card. The grave is a representation of your old life and you're rising out of it. So the Judgment card is really, really positive, and it is just bringing you closer to that final part of this journey, which is the next card, the World. Now, in terms of readings, it's a pretty self-explanatory card in terms of themes of rebirth, of resurrection, particularly in things like relationships. If this card comes up, it could be seen as a second chance, and you moving in the direction that you actually want to move in and starting to really pursue the life that you want to pursue without the outside influences that have maybe been holding you back. So it's been a very long and often challenging journey, but we've now got to the final card of the Major Arcana, and that card is the World. And this card is really about fulfillment, unity, and completion. And I would say completion is probably the strongest part of this card. Now, let's look at the card, because there is so much symbolism on this card that is really important. So the first thing to look at on the card would be the eagle, the man, the lion, and the bull in all four corners of the card. And this is a representation of the Lamassu. And if we look at the book of Genesis, and again, I don't refer to the Bible very often, but I think this is relevant. These are the creatures that are guarding the Garden of Eden in the book of Genesis. Now, on top of that, we have the main figure in the middle, and at first it would appear to be a female figure. We can see the naked breasts on the figure, and they are wrapped up around the midriff as well. But this is actually a representation of the unity of male and female. This is what you would call a hermaphrodite. It's a male and female figure combined, and that is really a representation of the unity of opposites. It's often said that magic is the union of opposites, the union of male feminine, the red king and the white queen, unity. And that's really what this card is representing there in the main theme in the middle. Now, there is also the wreath around the figure, and this is a representation of completion. If you think to the imagery of the snake eating itself, the snake eating its tail, and it forms the ring, and that is just showing not just completion, but also the never-ending cycle, the constant change and movement. So that is very interesting representation of where you've actually got to within the journey, and you've now reached this point, and you reach this point of complete unity within yourself, with the outside world, with the internal to you. And it's also a representation that although you have reached the end of this journey, you've also reached the beginning. As I've said many times in other videos, this journey is never fully complete. So once you've reached the world, then you're straight back to card 0, the Fool, and the journey starts again. It just starts again from a different perspective, from a different stage. So you may have reached this point, say, on an intellectual level, but you haven't mastered the emotional level. So you will now take part in this journey again if you choose to, and do it from an emotional standpoint. The journey is never complete, basically. You are always working towards enlightenment, if you want to call it that. So you will have completed one aspect of your life, mastered it even, but then the journey starts again, and there is another aspect for you to master. And when you complete that journey, then you'll have another aspect to master on top of that. Whenever you make progress like this, I would say that you are essentially feeding your soul. And that's a very important thing. And I have mentioned this multiple times, but whether you are taking this journey with the knowledge of what you're doing, or you are just going through life, you are still on this journey. We all have this. And many people don't complete the first step or even the second step. So if you make it right the way through to the end, you've done something that very few people do. And then to keep mastering, to keep progressing, is something that is rarer and rarer. And there are a few historical figures that I would let you research yourself, and maybe you would even disagree with who these people are. But I would say there are a few historical figures that have really achieved this high level and completed multiple journeys. So I would also like to mention that whenever you master magic, it's almost a pointless thing to do unless you actually bring it into your physical life, unless you integrate it into your life and allow it to actually do what it can do. So, for example, if someone has mastered magic on some level, but their life is a mess, it's chaotic, they're struggling in lots of different aspects, then they haven't integrated the actual knowledge, the practicality of magic into their life. And that's something that they absolutely need to do, because they've mastered something but not mastered it in a way that has brought any relevance, any benefit to their life. It's okay having the knowledge internally, but if you don't bring that knowledge out and actually integrate it into every aspect, every single aspect that you can, then it's an exercise in doing something that's bringing you absolutely no benefit. And the whole point of magic, the whole point of this journey, is to benefit you, to then give back to the world, to benefit the people around you, the people that you care about, to benefit strangers even. And I don't want to sound sort of self-important or pompous even, but the whole reason why I started this YouTube channel was to share my experience with magic, to share, if you would call it knowledge. I prefer to just call it experience, because I don't want to sound like I'm, some kind of wise mystic sage. I'm not, but I've had my experiences, and a lot of people are interested, and hopefully what I've shared, and will continue to share, will help people in some way. That's, a small aspect of me giving back what I've sort of challenged myself with. And I think that if we could all do that, and whether we are knowingly incorporating magic or not into it, it would just benefit everybody around us, and would help each other as well. We all struggle, whether you are a master of magic or not. We all have life struggles, and we all need help. So that's sort of my thoughts on integrating magic. It's not good enough to just learn the knowledge and do the internal changes. You need to bring it out and actually, take that action with it as well. So thank you for watching. It's been a very, very long journey. When I first started this, had no idea that it would take me months to complete these videos, but I'm very glad that I started it and have now finished it. And every single interaction, every single like, every single share, comment, etc., is genuinely appreciated. It's the whole reason of why I even started doing this. So thank you so much.